Welcome to TGIF.
We did it.
We did it. What did we
We
do?
have finished the Torah,
Wow.
the first 5 books of the Bible. Well, we're finishing it today, I should say. So we are wrapping up the book of Deuteronomy. Hard to believe, but hopefully you've been finding how Designed for Purpose kind of fits into all of these books, even all the way back to the Torah, the first books of the Bible. So we are on episode 4 today, finishing up with chapters 33 and 34. And if you've already read Deuteronomy or you know how Moses' time ends, it's probably no surprise that today we're going to talk about
Our word of the day, which is death.
yes, Moses' life comes to an end, and we all will experience it. We don't know when, we don't know how, but death is something that we're all going to experience.
Indeed.
But the beautiful thing about the Bible is we're able to learn and glean from these stories of lives and deaths and able to fit them into our life, because it's all God's story and we're all part of God's story. They were then and we are now.
Yeah, and Deuteronomy is filled with a lot of reminders of instructions and following God. Deuteronomy, in essence, is a repeating of the law, repeating of the law, and repeating of the law, and repeating of the law. So here we go at the end, though. We are looking at Deuteronomy chapter 34, verses 4 and 5. Then the Lord said to Moses, "This is the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob when I said, I will give it to your descendants. I have now allowed you to see it with your own eyes, but you will not enter the land." So Moses, the servant of God, died there in the land of Moab, just as the Lord had said. So the promise was always there, and God is explaining it even in more detail to Moses in this moment. Moses knew he wasn't going to go into the promised land, though. He knew he had already done this error. And so when you looked at chapter 32, though, we have this really, it's a song of witness to all the people of Israel about the importance of observing the commandments of God. And so now we're stepping into this last section, which we have, chapter 33 is filled with this final blessing to each of the nations. So he really picks it apart and just says, this is who you are. Remember who you are. Be blessed by who you are. And then we come to this final chapter 34, which is Moses dies in the land of Moab. So Moses dies in a foreign land, never having got to step foot on the promise. How discouraging do you think that might have been? I mean, is there some level that, even in today's world, when we think of all the things maybe we want to still do for God or go and do for God, and we feel like a life gets cut short, and we say, wow, they were doing so much for God, and they had, just imagine if they lived another 5 or 10 years, what they could have continued to do for God. But that's not how it works. God's timing is perfect timing, and when we talk about death, it's a hard topic to cover, because we all kind of want that easy, just go to sleep, right, and it's over. And it's never that easy. And so Moses dies in this land. We were in Israel. This place is actually in Jordan, though. So we had an interesting journey to Jordan, traveling into another country. But we went to this elevation of about 2,300 feet, and we looked out across what Moses would have looked out across. Now, I don't know if you remember, but it wasn't that clear of a day, was it? I imagine that in that day there was no smog, there was no anything in the way, so it was very clear. But if you think about where we were standing and you look across, you'd see the top of the Dead Sea, and on across there would have been Jerusalem. And then just to the right would have been Jericho and that beautiful Jordan River and Jordan Valley, the green, lush, flowing with fruits and honey, just a beautiful area. So we got to see some of that. I got to kind of experience that moment. But when I remember kind of standing there thinking, man, that close, and you don't get to go, that could be really discouraging, and knowing that your end is near.
But we have to also think about, Moses kind of learned he made mistakes. We all make mistakes. The beautiful thing is, it's not over when we mess up. God will always receive us back. And I think Moses had that because he was giving the blessings onto the tribes and the other people. He knew his time had come to an end, and that his time coming to an end was not in any of his control. It was totally God's control. And I think we try to control those things. And maybe Moses had that sense of, God, it was, my life was yours to begin with.
I like that.
And this is my timing. Maybe this isn't how I want to go. But he took time to say some important things, to give these blessings, to do these things. And if we think about our lives, and when we're raising our children, and we're helping guide our grandchildren, everything we say and do matters, because there's always going to be a generation that follows us. And what's that generation that follows us looking to us for? Are they seeing us as giving up, giving in, being angry at God? Or are they seeing our lives lived in a sense of surrender, where even when we can't control things, God is still at work? It doesn't make it easy by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just how God works. He works in and through all things. So I have to think that Moses had this sense through all of this, and that is why he could look and see the promised land, but not be bitter. And that's hard to imagine until you're in that place. It's just like when you're facing death or the death of a loved one. You can't imagine what it's going to be like until you're actually in it. But it's just finding God in the presence and how he's working in and through it.
God didn't call us to live a perfect life. He called us to live a holy life, and that's very much different, because in a holy life you can make mistakes. Because you have a forgiven God, you can actually then connect back with God and seek that forgiveness. So I hear people say, we want more for the next generation, so they can achieve more, do greater, do big. How about if they just achieve holiness? Could we just be trying to raise up the next generation to be a holy nation, a holy group of people? I think that's what Moses learned along the way. And so we're transitioning to, the understanding of these finite human lives. They're finite. It's guaranteed.
One thing we all will do is die.
Yeah. And so then can we learn from Moses how he passed it along to Joshua? What's going to happen now for Joshua? That's where we're headed. And so how is he blessing Joshua, encouraging the Israelites? This is Joshua. He's taking you to this new place. Listen and take hold of what God has taught you.
All the way until the end. It ain't over until God says it's over. And the beautiful thing is we understand the cross and live on this side of the cross. So we know the over is just this temporary life that we were truly never destined for. We're a child of God. God wants us with him for all eternity. So this is that little temporary, that dash that we always say. What difference are we making even in the midst of our mistakes and the things that that don't go the way we want? I think it's more how we process and how we handle and how we allow that next generation, maybe the next non-believer, to see the faith that we have. The faith is real. Grief is real. Death is real, but faith is real. But God, in the midst of all of it, every little thing is going to be all right, even when you don't feel like it in that midst.
Yeah. So death's hard. There's no doubt it's hard to lose somebody, but I think that when you're talking about leaving a legacy, the importance of leaving a legacy, it all ties back to how you're living a holy and faithful life to God. That's what's so important.
We tell our kids all the time, there's no money. They are not going to get riches and fortune. But if they see us investing in ministries and missions and the things that are dear to our heart, and investing our resources into the church, into people, then I think we have left them the best thing we could leave them, even if it's not going to fit in their bank account.
Exactly.
That makes the difference.
Yep.
So the question we leave you with as we wrap up the Torah, book of Deuteronomy, how are you making plans to pass along God's blessings? Not the blessings and the things you've been given, maybe the family heirloom, that's a joke in our house of a vase that got broke. It's not those blessings, but what are you doing today and every day for your children. Maybe your children are grown, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. How are you investing in and sharing God's blessings with them? That's
Raise up the next Joshua.
exactly, absolutely. So with that, we are getting ready because we know Joshua fit the Battle of Jericho, and that is where we are headed. So if you want to be ready for the first episode of Joshua, read chapters 1 through 5, and we'll see you next time on TGIF. Make it a great week. Bye.